I'm super excited about our next guest. This is a world-renowned mastering engineer who actually just got off the plane from the States, staying busy, traveling around, in addition to maintaining a high-level mastering studio in the UK. She's mastered all of your favorite records: Bjork, Aphex Twin, Snoop Dogg, The White Stripes, Sigur Rós, Brian Eno. So quite a stellar catalog. Please welcome Mandy Parnell. So thanks for being here. I assumed you'd be flying over from London, but you flew from Detroit. So
well, Detroit, New Orleans, London, Berlin.
How's the jet lag? You're okay?
It's fine.
We'll be here an hour and it'll be over. But you're doing a bunch of other events at Loop too, right?
Yeah.
Listening sessions.
Listening session, and then a workshop showing some before and after of mastering and talking about what I like, what I don't like in a mix.
Great. So, I mean, we could spend this time talking about your career. I think it's more interesting to talk about the practice, the actual work. So, mastering is one of these things that seems to be really confusing for people. What do you wish people understood about the work that you do and about the work that they'll do if they're mastering their own music?
So I think there's a misconception about the role of a mastering engineer in the production team. And what people have to understand, our first role is to be an objective set of ears to the project. So when people are producing music, they might be working on something for a couple of months, up to maybe 3 years. The project that I did with Brian Eno, they'd been working on that for 9 years. So they're really inside the project and can't see it from an outside perspective. So my role is to be that first objective set of ears and to help question the team about what they've done, and if there is any issues with the mix, to talk about it and see whether it's something that can be fixed, or whether we need to try and fix it in mastering. So that's the first role, really. People always see it as, oh, you EQ, you limit, you do all this stuff. That comes at the last end of what my role is, if that makes sense. That's the cherry on the cake to actually, do anything artistic.
So most of what you're doing is feedback.
Yeah, it's talking, feedback, listening, thinking about how we're going to place it, because every artist wants their work to stand alone and be its own thing, but then we need to make it fit inside, the world. If it's in a playlist on the radio, how's it going to work against the tracks around it?
So if the work that you're doing is primarily really objective, does that imply that you don't have a sound? Like, do people come to you because they want the Mandy Parnell sound?
Well, I think everyone's going to have a sound because it's based on how our ears interpret the sound. Yeah. So everyone's going to bring their own flavour to it. I mean, really, a master engineer needs to try and be as neutral as possible. Some artists want me to bring something to it, others don't. Others want something that's very flat. So it really depends on the project.
And if they want you to bring something to it, is it a specific thing? Like, yeah, Mandy sounds really good at 2K or something like this? Or is it more subtle?
It's probably more about space and groove. Even though you get to mastering, we can change a lot inside the dynamics and the phase inside the mix. So it might be that we need to change that. When I did some stuff with Annie Lennox, I actually really sort of changed the groove slightly by changing the frequencies,
So this is not compression related.
No.
EQ can change the groove.
Well, yeah. If you push something here, it's going to change the way the kick drum responds. If you push something there, it's going to change the way the bass is, So, yeah.
It sounds like there's some magic there that would be worth learning.
Yeah, we all do it.
Okay. So what does a typical workday look like for you? Or is there
coffee? Lots of coffee. Okay. So the studio is in my house, which is great in some respects and terrible in others. It means I don't go out very much, so don't get a lot of exercise. I walk downstairs, get coffee, go in the studio. If clients come to attend the session, which I do try to encourage people to attend mastering, especially initially when you're getting to know a mastering engineer, I think it's really good to go there rather than just send something and it being an abstract thing. To meet people and communicate is a lot easier. So we'll do a playback session and I'll literally sit on the sofa and play the project. I won't play it with the view technically. I want to listen to it just how anyone would listen to it. And then if things feel awkward to me, I'll make notes. So, often when we're listening that way, where we're relaxed, it will be more obvious what I need to do. And then I'll discuss with it could be the artist, producer, mix engineer, A&R guy, whoever attends, it could be all of them. We would have a discussion about what I was thinking, what I was hearing, what the album was about for them. If we have the artists there, often we need to go through the journey of the whole concept of the album. If it's a mix engineer, we might just talk about technically what they've done. So it really depends on the project. And then I'll start to master. So normally an album will take anything from a day to sort of 2 days to EQ and master. Some things might take a bit longer. I talk about working with Aphex Twin, and I kept getting up to master when we got to a point of what we were going to do, because I had to do tryouts for it, and there was lots of discussion to the build-up of actually doing the mastering of the album. And I ended up mastering it through the night because that was the best time for me. I'd worked with an indie band all day, a guitar band. They'd attended. I was very claustrophobic. And it was about 11 o'clock at night. I had an assistant with me, and I said, do you fancy staying through the night with me? I think I'm going to do the Aphex Twin album. So yeah, he just jumped for joy because he really wanted to assist me on it. And yeah, we just had our own little rave, dimmed all the lights and did it. So yeah, sometimes it's really hard. I'll have artists come and attend and I'll be like, what, can you just leave it with me? I think I'm going to get something better if I'm on my own. Others, I'd prefer them to be there. So it really depends.
Is this mostly a personal thing, like the vibe that you have with that artist? Okay.
Yeah, and just the music, how I connect with the music.
Certain music, you need to be alone.
Yeah, sometimes you just want to do it of a night time. Daytime isn't the right, sort of 11, 12 o'clock is not the time to be working on this music. You might want to work on it, through the night. Like the Max Richter Sleep album, I did, it's 8 hours of music. I did over a series of days through the night.
It's continuous, 8 hours.
Yeah.
How do you master a project like that? Are you listening to all 8 hours?
In sections. So the sections were between 40 minutes to an hour. And then, just sections, lots of automation.
Right. Can you talk about any current yet unreleased projects that you're working on or artists that you're working with?
The new album. We just finished that, so singles come out, That was, again, her albums. She is incredible for challenging me technically. And yet again, she did. So every project has been, I don't know what it is. She has so much innovation. She just does things and wants things done in a particular way that makes you push your own boundaries, which is great.
And these change from album to album?
Yeah.
So does she come in with a fully formed artistic concept, or are you helping her craft that?
Fully. In the sense of artistically, she knows what she wants, but then it's like, how are we going to transfer everything she wants to make it work in a public medium, especially the level she is. If it was, because she comes from a very underground artist background. So she really wants that underground artist thing, but then we need to bring it into, the production runs are huge, she's a huge artist. So just bridging these two worlds, And
you worked on a project of hers before that was a mastering job that she rejected from another mastering engineer, right? Can you talk a little bit about what happened there?
So when she did the Biophilia project, where she did the apps, she'd had everything mastered. It was all in the box, ready to go. And she decided she wasn't very happy with it. She wasn't happy with, I think, the person that she worked with, and where they ended up, but she wasn't happy musically as well, because the project was written with the apps in mind. And when she listened to the album, just like so, and without all the visuals, she felt that she could have pushed it a bit more. So she went back in with different beats producers and changed it all. And she worked with Layla Arab, who I'd been doing some work with. And Layla said to Bjork, I really think you should get Mandy to come and work with you. You should try it and see whether you like working with her. And so Bjork flew me up to Iceland, and I walked into the studio, and I walked into them opening the Pro Tour session of the mix, and there was no 2-track, and basically it wasn't finished, and Bjork's assistant said to me, well, you're finishing it with Bjork. And I was a bit like, shit, okay, I'm not a mix engineer. And I was like, aren't you going to mix it? And he was like, no. And I mean, it was generally mixed, it was stems, but we did a lot more comping, a lot more editing. I mean, she's very in control of the Pro Tools stuff, very in control of what she wants to do. So yeah, we had a great, I think, 5 days of many hours to produce that record for her.
I remember you mentioned something in an interview where you talk about how she's like gradually pushing you off the desk, and she takes over.
She takes over, yeah.
Even at the mixing and mastering stage.
Yeah, very much so. She's, she'll start off, and she'll be, maybe on the sofa, and you start playing, then she comes sit next to you, then she just, you just slowly go like this, and she has the controls.
That's great. I want to back away and get into some more technical things, because I think a lot of independent artists know that they're not supposed to master their own material, but they all do, because it's the reality that, we'll talk about this devaluation of music topic later, but I think you can get software suites now where you slap a preset on it and it's mastered somehow. You don't want people to do this, of course, but knowing that they will, is there something you can tell them about best practice? Like, okay, if you're going to use this software anyway, here's how to not make a terrible record.
Well, this model really came up when, in 2000s, really, with the remix, late 90s, 2000. So everyone was remixing for everyone, and everyone had their preferred mastering engineer. And what was happening was they were sending the mixes through to go on to, the EP for the remix, 12-inch, whatever. And they'd be disappointed when they'd get it back with how their track sounded compared to somebody else, because the master engineer didn't know how far to push the mix. Our roles is very much to transfer things flat if we can. So this was where the first start of producers mastering for themselves came. It was more, to make sure that their mix was how they intended it to be. But these guys were used to going into the master room because, they were used to cutting 12 inches. So they were used to what things sounded like, and, they checked their stuff out on club systems. So what I'd say to people, I say it a lot to students, is definitely try and get the stuff out on the club, because when you're mixing in your bedroom productions, you're on very small monitors and you don't really know what's going on in the low end. And often what happens, I'll get the mixes in and they'll be so technically wrong, and it's going to cause so many problems transferring them through to different mediums. So your best way of trying to check it is to go out onto a club system where you're going to be able to hear all your sub stuff going on, and try and learn, because you're guessing. Years ago, even now, if you go into a mix room, a proper studio mix room, you'll have your near-field monitors, you'll have mid-field monitors, and then you'll have full-range monitors. And the whole reason was that you would go between these three when you were mixing, so you'd have complete control of your sound. And often when, I'll go into some clients' rooms, sometimes, guys will come in And I'll know that they know how to mix, but it's the room is set up really bad. The monitors are set up bad. And I mean, I've gone down to so many different clients' studios in London, even outside of London, and gone in just to set their monitors up, because it's not that they can't mix, it's that the system is wrong. So it's thinking about that, and keeping control of your sound, especially the bassing, because it will cause us lots of problems, if it's not right.
You mentioned that you see a lot of the stuff being technically wrong. Are there certain patterns?
Yeah, too much subs, too much bass. Yeah, because what you're doing, you're adding in there, or you're not fine tuning to the degree. It's going to sound great on your little speakers on the bass, but then when you get it out there, it's not. And then when it goes onto vinyl, it's going to cause us problems. And all of a sudden, when it's going through to these different platforms, we're going to have to do things that are absolutely horrifying to try and fix it, to make it work. So the best way to check it really is to try and get into a club before anyone's in there. I mean, that's what years ago, when they used to cut dub plates, the guys would come in, they'd cut a 12-inch dub plate, they'd go out to the club, they'd play it out, they'd go back, tweak their mix before they went into production with it. They wouldn't let it out to the public until it was really fine-tuned. So when we talk about back in the day, all these great records, this is how they were made. They really fine-tuned it. And I do feel today people aren't doing that as much, Maybe it's because they don't know. So yeah, hence I'm out here to try and educate you all. So play it out, on a club system.
And if you don't have access to something like this, the best you can do is spend a lot of money on monitors.
Yeah, but I think you can, Everyone knows a DJ that's going to be playing somewhere, There's clubs everywhere. You must be able to.
I think a lot of producers think of mastering at a technical level as being about EQ and compression and limiting, but you talk a lot about gain, adding various gain stages. And when I first read these articles, before I talked to you last week, I was thinking, she means in the analog domain to add color and saturation. And you're saying, no, even in the box, gain staging. Yeah. Can you talk about what this means at the mastering level?
So here's the thing, what's happening today, and I mean, I have it a lot, even with top artists that are using younger mix engineers. People are mixing into a mastering chain in the stereo bus. And this isn't a very good practice, because what happens is when you take it off to send it to mastering, your mix falls apart. So the gain staging is really important. The other side of this mixing into the mix bus is you're often chasing to match what's already out there, but what's already out there is too loud. And we're in this place at the moment of bringing it down. So years ago, we did used to clip a hell of a lot inside the box, and it was very specifically because to try and get the energy through it, because the technology wasn't very good. And there was very good reasons why we did it back in the day. We don't need to do that now. The technology is incredible. The dynamic range that we can get is incredible. We don't need to follow them practices. So it's about, steering clear of the red, not going too loud, especially with what's going on with the streaming stuff, where we are going to have to bring it down. If you've already got a mix that's slammed and we bring it down, going through to these streaming platforms, it's going to sound terrible. So it's about thinking about that. So what I say to people is do a mix where it sounds great. And then, maybe bounce it out or put another bus on there to do a mastering bus. But get your mix sounding great before you actually master it. Don't mix into all these things and have it slammed, because you're just flatlining everything. And all the people say to me, wow, I love the work that you did on this, I love the work that you did on that. If we looked at the mixes, you'll see they're not very slammed. They're not flatlined. There is, sort of movement there. So it's thinking about that, a little bit here, gain staging is, look, we can hear down to, I don't even know, point, 0 whatever of a dB. We'll hear the change of that. We'll hear the phase shift change of that. So you can do a lot inside your mix just with little movements of gain, rather than thinking, I need to add loads to make that happen. Small changes can create a lot of space.
And also even at the mastering stage when you're working with a 2-bus.
Yeah, 2-bus or stems, I'll do a little bit thing, So say I bring a 2-track into, my DAW, I might change the gain staging, on the clip. I might change it on the bus, and then I might change it on the master bus output. So I, just there can do things, let alone if I do anything digital inside plugins, I might change the gain inside there.
And are these plugins that are adding color, or is it really just volume?
It could be volume. It could be if I'm adding color, I might not want to go hard into the plugin, So the same principles. It's really interesting chatting to mix engineers that come from analog boards, that have come into a box. It's really interesting chatting to them because they do follow the similar principles with gain staging. So I think there is something to it that sometimes gets lost with the younger producer.
And you're still working quite heavily with both analog and in the box, so plugins and high expensive hardware too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it depends. The thing is, there's no right or wrong. So, like I said, when I start at the session and I do the playback, at that point I'm making decisions about what I'm going to do. Some things I might not do very much. Some things I might keep inside the box. Most things do come out to analog, but it depends. Everything's different. Every piece of art is different. So you look at that as its own entity and decide.
Have you ever had a project come in and you said, well, I can't do this with the gear I have now. I have to go spend a bunch of money on something?
No.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
I don't think it's about the gear, though. I've mastered on a Mackie sort of 24-track mixer that, is not a very great thing. I think, I've mastered, in a hotel room in Vegas for a very, famous R&B artist, just with a headphone, a sound card, and, a little lunchbox that my partner Martin had with him when we were out there, on tour and at conferences. So I think it's more about this, isn't it? It's about our ears and how we interact with sound. Cheaper equipment just makes us work harder, I think.
And the thing you did in the hotel room is out on the record.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm not going to say who it is because you're recording him. So you can ask me later.
We'll ask you later. Another technical question. You've also mentioned using multiple limiters in your chain,
yes.
Which I think many people this is sort of news to people. I think people imagine the limiter is the last thing.
Yes, so the limiter. What happens today, I love you guys, is you put limiters on like a mix engineer. Now, for your master bus, so for what you're trying to copy for mastering. And you'll put things on like 6 dB, 12 dB. I've even had 16 dB. Why? You speak to mastering engineers, the most I've ever done on one limiter is 2.5. That's the most, 2.5. So if I want to get lots, I'll just, use 3, maybe 4 different limiters, different settings, but just, 0.7 here, 1.3 here, 1.5 there, just little bits, to build the level up, to get it up there. And by doing that and not slamming it hard with one thing helps keep some more dynamic in there. So it's thinking about that. Do I need to do everything with one and just flatline everything? Or do we want to create some movement with these limiters?
And it's not necessarily, again, about the color of a particular limiter. It's more about controlling how much it has to do.
Well, everything's going to bring color.
Sure.
And everything's going to bring phase shift. Like I said, we can change the level on something, even on your stereo bus. 0 point whatever, 3, 0.1, and you're going to hear a difference.
phase shift has come up a few times in this discussion so far, and I think it's something many of us don't think about very much.
Okay, so every time you change something, especially with gain, things are going to change in the mix. Something's going to come forwards and backwards, you know. So, you know, when you're, you know, doing listening tests, if you've got a monitor controller that, you know, you can, you know, sort of match the gain, if you like, if you're bringing it down, you know, and you can turn it up and listen, you'll understand what I mean. If you bring something down half a dB, the snare drum might pop out more and the kick drum might go away, you know? Because even though it's digital, it's still going to change just like analog does, you know? It's numbers, you know, and there's rounding up and rounding down going inside these numbers. So it's going to cause difference to what we're hearing.
So you mentioned this briefly earlier about how volumes are coming down as a result of streaming. And one of the things that was great when we talked last week, you said that your job is a nightmare right now because of whatever is happening with streaming and various standards. Can you talk about what's going on?
So what's happened is we've got all these businesses. When I came into the industry, we had standards. You know, it was reel-to-reel tape to vinyl. Yeah, and there were standards. This is what you needed to do, you know, to fit into these criterias technically. Now we don't have that. We have businesses that are driving what we're doing. So all the different streaming platforms from YouTube to Apple Music have given us in the industry different targets to go to. So I think YouTube is a -11. Apple Music is a -16. I think Apple Music are changing it and they're going to give us a sort of gauge because -16 is quite low. If you think at the moment, most of us are hitting a -4, -5. So we're going to have to come down a lot. And then in between these different platforms, we've got a difference of 5 dB, you know. And if we're talking about we can hear a change of, you know, 0.01 of a dB, this is, you know, it's quite a minefield for me because we need to master stuff so it works across all these platforms. Forget even about vinyl, just about all the different streaming platforms. There's a great plugin out there by a company called Nugent called Master Check. And what you can do is you can get your mix, and they've backward engineered what's going on, you know, all the different streaming platforms, the digital radio, be the streaming platform on a mobile to a computer because it's different. How the algorithms inside, you know, the program is, you know, the streaming program. So Nugent have done this, you know, backward engineering of it to give us tools that we can play. You know, you can put it on your stereo bus, and so when you've got your mix, you can play it through it, or your mastered, you know, mix, you can play it through it and see what it's going to sound like through these things. See where the clipping factor are. There is meters on there to show you, yes, you're in danger area here, and just give you a great tool to help us maneuver through it. I mean, this tool came about from about 10 years ago. I was at a broadcast show and met the guys, and they said, what would be a great tool for you in the studio? And I said, a really simple meter for all of us to be able to use, because we have all these loudness meters that are circles, and that are great, but are very technical and not great for, you know, a sort of DJ producer that's just very instant, because the way they make music is very instant. They want something that's really quick to look at, like VUs were for us years ago. So that's what this tool is. So check it out. I mean, it's a really interesting plugin to help us.
And you've done a bunch of listening tests of these streaming platforms, right? And found some really interesting results.
What colour of shit do you want? No. The thing is, it's not, you know, it could be better. The reason it's like that is because we're sending very loud mixes to them. So their algorithm, what happens is we don't do the conversions down to all the different codecs. There's loads of different codecs out there. And, you know, no record company would pay a mastering studio to do it. So it goes to digital distribution, and they do it. And it's an automated system. Digital distribution companies have their own proprietary system. It's not a system they buy off the shelf. They've had somebody program it. And then they do all the conversions to go through to all the different platforms. And it, like I said, it's an automated system, so nobody listens to it. So if we've got this very loud, slammed mix, mastered mix, that goes through to these platforms, when it's coded, there's going to be distortion. I mean, some of you might know about the Mastered for iTunes initiative where they gave us, tools to try and help maneuver through that, and that was a start. But that's where this Nugent plugin comes in, it's to help us maneuver through some of this distortion factor. So I did a listening test with a load of producers and engineers. We took 5 tracks, big tracks, and captured them in from 15 different streaming platforms. Now, that's a lot, isn't it? And they were all different, and it really was. None of them sounded like the original WAV. It was like, what colour of shit do you want? Not to be rude to platforms, but, what's being sent to them can't cope going through to this codec, so they can't cope with it. So it's really thinking about that, because people often sort of blame master engineers, go, oh yeah, I got my track master, and then we got it up onto, wherever, YouTube, and it sounded like shit, but it might not be our fault, if that makes sense,
So what are these platforms doing? Is it some kind of auto mastering?
They're doing codec audio, so they're bringing it down into a codec, so it's not MP3, there's all different ones. I mean, it's a minefield of how many different codecs are out there, and every platform wants a different thing. I mean, I heard that YouTube ingest in 2 different places in 2 different ways, so even across YouTube, it's not going to be the same. And the other thing that somebody was explaining to me with YouTube, that you'll put your stuff up there and the loudness normalization can take up to 2 weeks to kick in. So you might check it straight away and it'd be fine, and then 2 weeks later there might be an issue with it. So it's a minefield. At the moment it's just about us talking a lot, realizing there is no right or wrong to this. There's just us having to learn to maneuver through it. Because like I say, we don't have a standard. And if you think we're at, like I said, -3 to -5 at the moment, and the highest, sort of level target is YouTube at -11, just look at that, how much we've got to maneuver down. And nobody wants to be quieter. We've always gone for loudness since the beginning of recorded audio. It's been, how loud can we get this? Even with Horn acoustic recordings, they were looking for loudness.
Are mastering engineers even getting to the point where they're releasing different masters for different platforms?
Well, we do, in the sense that you do a different version for iTunes. Recently, what I do, so iTunes want high res. They want 96K 24-bit. When I master, I will do a 96K 24-bit, I will do a 48K 24-bit, a 44.1 24-bit, 44.1 16-bit, and then the mastered for iTunes. So hoping that when whatever needs to go to whatever platform, because they're all asking for something different. So rather than just delivering one file and letting the digital distribution do the conversion, the sample rate conversion, and if any of you have messed around with that, I mean, that's a whole minefield in itself. Talk about listening tests forever, to maneuver through that. So what I do is we do all the sample rate conversions so that I have control over the sound rather than one of these, automated systems doing it, because that could be part of the problem of why when we hear it back through some of these platforms that we go, it sounds shit. It's because they've done a sample rate conversion that isn't very good.
You're excited about a new file format, right? This yes. MQA?
MQA. So it's called Master Quality Assured. And it's a high-res codec audio. Tidal has started streaming it. a lot of the hi-fi players have got the conversion in there that they can play it back. So it's a high-res file that can fold down into a low-res file. And we can put a code in there that we can go check across any platform. This is the future. Any platform to check that it's our file, the production team's file, basically. So it's a bit like the mastered for iTunes, but going a step further, where this, is a packet. So if you're playing it on your phone and your phone can't play it back at the high res, it will just play it like a CD quality. Well, it's slightly better than CD quality, I'd say. And then if your converter can play back the high res, it'll open out to the high res. When they came down to a studio and played it to us, I mean, it was shocking. It's the best codec audio I've ever heard. Remember, it's codec, so it's compressed audio, but it's the best sounding one out there for sure. And Tidal are streaming it, so you can go check it out.
And what would it take to make this a standard across all the platforms?
They're working on it. It's to do with licenses, and it's all that grown-up business stuff that these big companies do about lots of handshakes with money, I think. But it's a great format. I was lucky to be involved with the beta testing with some of my heroes in the industry, and it's just starting to come. It's been a long process. It's been in development for a long time. It came, they approached me, I don't know, 5-6 years ago when I was moaning about delivering a WAV file. I don't think a WAV file is a very stable format for us to use as deliverable for our audio. Too many things can go wrong. I've had lots of things go wrong delivering it to record companies' digital distribution. So one of the things that I love about the MQA is we're going to close the format inside the studio and nobody will be able to mess with it. So from that point of view, it's heaven for me.
So we talked a little bit about people mastering at home and software. We talked about all the problems. We're basically talking about all the things that make your job hard today. I wanted to ask you about automated and cloud-based mastering tools, because this is a new way that people can make your job hard. What are your thoughts?
They can't give you feedback, really. I've had some clients and some colleagues of mine that have taken one track and sent it to the cloud multiple times and got back different versions every time. Well, that shouldn't happen, surely. Really. Should it? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's supposed to be able to look at the file and, decide this is how I'm going to master it and master it. So yeah, it's a tool. I think a bit like, we talked about the dub plate thing. I think, it might be an interesting tool, for somebody just to put a limiter on, somebody, a young person that might feel a bit apprehensive about messing around with something. But, how it's, I think it's interesting. And I think, it needs to be researched, but how much of a good tool it is, I've just heard bad things about it. It might work for a 4 to the floor thing where it just adds a bit of limiting, onto it, and it might make it sound a bit more exciting. But I think for more acoustic stuff, I've heard terrible things come back, and then people have paid to use it and ended up paying to come and master with me as a result of using it. So I don't think it's a great tool. It was a research project. They are doing a lot of research. They're doing it for mixing now. I think we can't take away the emotion. We can't get rid of our emotion. Why did we all get into music? Why did we follow it as a career? It's because we all emotionally connected with it. A machine doesn't have that emotion. So it's not going to bring that feeling that we have. So therefore, when it's working with stuff, how's it going to know, well, at that point, we need to push it. We need to make that go higher. We need to bring that down. How's it going to know to do that? I'm not sure. It's intriguing. I think it's fun as a research thing, but I don't think it's very realistic.
Do you think it will get better? I mean, of course it will get better.
Yeah, of course, everything gets better, but it will never replace human emotion, which is what music's all about.
Mm-hmm. you do a lot of work with organizations like the Audio Engineering Society and the Grammys, which is beyond just talking about mastering. You're also talking about the state of the industry. Can you talk a little bit about this work that you're doing?
So a few years ago, I went to Surrey University. They do a Tom Meister course down there with these, with what's deemed some of the best students coming into the industry. These kids have worked really hard, A-star students. They've worked hard to get to this university. And I had a room full of these kids, and I was given a talk to, and I just thought, oh my God, look at all these kids. This is one university. Look at all these kids that are deemed to be the top, picks for jobs in the industry. Where are the jobs? There is no jobs. How are they going to have a career out of this? And then I started looking at it. I mean, when I studied, there was 3 music production, music tech courses in the whole of the UK. We have over 200 now. It's just in the UK. 10 of us graduated. 100 started my course. 10 of us, about 10 of us graduated. But you think we've got all these people influxing, and I mean, it's not just in music, it's in media as well, influxing in every year. So because they're trying to get in the door, this thing's happening. They're willing to work for nothing. The business side of it are willing to push them to work for nothing. And as a result of that, they're trying to push the people that have been in it for a long time to work for nothing. So for instance, we have top Grammy-winning multi-platinum engineers in the UK that are doing a mix for £200. They can't even live on this money. But the reason it's got to that, where they're being expected to do that, is because everyone's doing stuff for nothing. Now, we shouldn't do anything in life for nothing. Even, let's get into my hippie side, I trained as a healer many years ago. And when you give healing, there has to be an exchange. You shouldn't just give that universal energy away. There has to be exchange, So what I say to kids is, okay, you've got bands that are just starting. Why not do a thing, and contract that the minute, they make it commercial and it goes commercial, that they pay you, there should be a fair exchange. Because if it keeps, you're seeing it already now, it's just a hobby. How many people have to have a day job and make music? I'm seeing it with top artists. They've all got day jobs. They're teaching, they're in schools. They shouldn't be, It's like they're working ridiculous. For me, I'm working 3 times the amount I was 15 years ago for a third of the money. I was earning more money 15 years ago. I've just been in New Orleans, the artists there, so all the musicians there. It used to be 20, 30 years ago, they played 1 gig that would give them enough money to pay their rent. They do the same gig, they're earning 20% of the bar. It's not even a tenth of their rent. They're all working sort of 3, 4 gigs out there. These guys at the top of their career. And this is what's happening. We're just watering it down. So it's thinking about that, thinking about keeping it professional, If you want a future, I think, all of us need to work together, to make it professional again.
I mean, this notion of like the devaluation of music, I guess, has been around at least since the Napster days. Do you think there's also pressure to devalue music in the work that has been done to democratize the production of music? I mean, it used to be that to make a record, you had to have enough money to go to a studio. And now you can make a record in your bedroom.
Yeah, but I mean, people could make records in bedrooms even, in the 90s, was the start of all that. I don't think that's what's driven it. I think it is very much from the public viewpoint. I mean, you think, music became free. The public don't understand, what they have in music. If we took music away from everything for one day, can you imagine what the world would be like? TV, adverts, film, just walking into shops. You think music is everywhere, but yet the public don't even realise how important it is in their life. So my thing is about, with the P&E wing and the MPGs and the AES is about, let's start talking about it. Because if we all start talking about it socially, then I believe that it just propagates and then change starts to happen. Yeah.
How do you take a thing that's free in terms of streaming and make people aware that it has value again?
The
This is
thing
hard.
is, they're telling us that the music business is earning as much money as it did in the 80s. Who's earning the money? It's these streaming platforms, it's not the artists. So we need to, in England, they're going to Parliament, the Peony are going to Congress. There's a lot of discussions about, how can we sort of change some of this. So I think, again, it's just about all of us talking about it and moaning about it, that we'll start to get change, I think, it's going to take time. It's taken us all this time to get to this, so it's going to take time to get back. But I believe we can do it. Mm-hmm.
There are some positive signs too, right? You were telling me earlier about all of these new vinyl pressing plants.
Yes, yeah. I've just been in Detroit to a conference about making vinyl. So there's people making new presses, which is fantastic. Over there, I heard of 5 new pressing plants that have opened in America. I know of 2 that have opened in Europe, and I'm sure there's more. It's big business. It's big business. They're talking about how big the vinyl industry. It was shocking. It's mind-blowing because, I just saw it whittle down, and now it's just coming back full force. Cutting studios, opening up all over the place, new plating facilities opening. New technology as well. A couple of people approached me with some new ideas about how to actually make the vinyl, because of course we have an issue with all the cutting lathes that we have being so old, the technology in them. So a couple of people approached me about getting involved in helping them beta test with some new ideas about how to cut records. So really fascinating.
And then it's going to need people who know how to master for vinyl.
Yes.
So.
Well, it's really hard to find people that really want to learn because it's a long process. To study to be a mastering engineer in a studio is like a 5-year process. Because that's what I mean. Anyone can add a bit of EQ and compression. That's not what the job is. The job is very much about understanding dynamics and how to take a production team when something's gone wrong and get it to the right place. How to meet the deadlines, how to protect the artist. It's a lot of psychology. And then the cutting of records, it's a long process. If you blow a cutter head up, it's £9,000 to have it repaired. And it's easy to blow them up, especially with electronic music. So, trying to find young people that actually want to commit and knowing that there isn't any money in the industry, it's quite hard,
We have a little less than 15 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to questions from you. There's a couple mics floating around, so if you have a question, raise your hand and someone will get you a mic.
Hi, thank you for your very interesting speech. I just wanted to ask you, for us who work in a bedroom, for example, and don't have access to a club or to a proper subwoofer, I recently acquired a sub pack. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's a wearable subwoofer, for those who don't know. And it completely changed the way I listen to my bass, and I think it improved it a lot, but I would like to hear what your thoughts are.
I've never experienced it in my room and compared it to my system, but I think it would be great. I think, because really when it comes to bass, it is about how we feel it anyway, And like you say, you feel that it's improved what you're doing. I'm sure it has. We, especially with electronic music, we need to experience it. When we go to clubs, it's about feeling it, I remember going to Lost. It used to be a techno, club night called Lost back in the day with Nilesh at the Exchange. He was a techno cutting engineer. And it would get so overbearing. With the bass, I'd be on the floor because it was the only way that I could cope with it because it would be so much, from my organs, so loud. So I think, if we can feel it, it's a good thing. But it is about you guys controlling your bass, because that's where it's going to bite you in the butt, when it goes through to some of these streaming platforms, the thing's not working very well, And radio as well, Mono. Can we talk about mono?
Go for it.
Back to mono. Check your stuff in mono. I know we have stereo. I know we have 3D audio now. We can do all these crazy surround things, but we need things to be mono compatible. These streaming platforms on your phone, the Nugent guys were telling me that they do the old radio model where they do the bring it to they do the sum and difference. So they bring it to mono and then bring it back to stereo. So if you've got stuff that is going to cancel in mono, it's going to cancel on these things. So yet again, the master engineer get blamed for it, but it might be back to the mix. So check your stuff in mono. Yeah? And don't mix too loud. Yeah. In your room, don't monitor too loud. Yeah,
hello. I've got a question. I've heard about people mastering individual stems for live performances. Mm-hmm. Have you ever done that, and
yeah.
What's the point?
So what happens is with electronic music, for some artists, when they play it live, they want it to sound like the record. And because sometimes in mastering we might do some quite extreme things, they might master the stems for that, Often, and as well, because it's coming out on a system, like for backing tracks, they need it to be, as hyped as possible. So to have it mastered, can really help with that. Because sometimes, just sending the stems out, it might sound a bit weak, especially with the drum stems or even some of the mid-range keyboard stems, it might need the hype behind it. So it's really worth looking at that, I do it a lot with electronic artists, Some of them even do crazy things where we'll master stems onto records, so that they can actually play the records, like the stem of the record, that was quite fun.
One here.
Hi, thank you for your insights. You are talking about going to clubs to hear the best version of your mix, and really, but it's so much music, as you said. Music is everywhere, and everyone's listening to music all the time. But most of us, although I don't have any statistics on this, listen on our white earphones, mm-hmm. on our computer speakers. Mm-hmm. How much does it matter that it sounds amazing to those listeners?
I think the thing is, when I started listening to music, it was like a cassette player, mono cassette player. When we first experience music and we first start to discover it, we don't give a shit what it sounds like. It's about pure emotion, isn't it? We're young, we just hear it. A perfect example, which I often use when I'm, give lectures, is Bob Marley jamming. You play that on any system, you don't care. You don't care. It does the same thing. You just go like this. You don't care what it sounds like. It moves you, no matter what it's on. So when it comes to your art, you've just got to make sure that the emotion transfers across everywhere. And that is the role of what a master engineer does, is try to make sure, I'll check everything. When we did Bjork Volnakura, it leaked, didn't it? Some of the tracks leaked, MP3s got out there, she got hacked into, and we had to jump so quickly. It wasn't finished, and, we had to work ridiculous. I got a phone call in the middle of the night on Saturday night, Sunday morning, and I needed to deliver, finished on Monday. And I remember, iTunes were incredible. The Apple Music and iTunes, they just released worldwide for us instantly. I mean, absolutely incredible. What a team of people to do that and get behind us. But I remember them sending the link back, and it was, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was exhausted. And I just had my laptop with the little laptop speakers, and I just pressed play. And just played the album. I just had tears rolling because everything we'd worked for came through on these little speakers. It didn't matter. The emotion came through. So I think the key is always follow the emotion. It doesn't matter what we play music on. If the emotion's there, it's going to move us.
Thank you.
Yes. Could you tell us a few of your favorite in-the-box plugins for compression, EQ, limiting, or maybe something special you have for analog gear as well?
So I like the Stephen Slate suite of stuff. I really love his team. My partner Martin sort of turned me on to, he understands the plugin world more than me. I came from analog, so it's always a work in progress for me to think about these things. But I really like the Stephen Slate stuff. And again, Fab Filter suite, I like the Fab Filter. I find that one of the more neutral things. The Stephen Slate stuff I'll use very much at the front end, maybe to try and help me fix a mix a bit, to beef up a mix, because it does some great stuff with the bass. So they're probably my two go-to, the Sony Oxford suite of stuff, again, quite neutral. I look for things that are quite neutral, because often when I'm doing plugin stuff, it's more, apart from the Slate stuff, it's more to doctor things, It's more to try and pull something in. Rather than create a vibe. Apart from the Slate stuff I'll probably create a vibe with. Is that good?
He was also wondering about analog gear.
So I have compressor limiters that I've worked with my whole career called Esoteric Audio Research, and made by a guy called Tim De Paraficini. So they're Valve copies of the Fairchild. And then I have a EMI transfer console, so old EMI mastering desk, basically, with EQs, compression, filters, MS section on it. And then, Prism 88 converters. And then my monitors are ATC. I have a surround sound setup. I like the Barefoots as well. And tannoys as well. But gear, I don't really care. I just find whatever I need. Is that good?
Yeah?
Hi, I have a question. How important is the acoustic in your room? I mean, most of us, we are mastering in the bedroom. What do you say about...
There's some great tools out there to help you set up your room. So, if you have a smartphone, you can get one of them sound pressure meters. There's great tools free out there that you can do things to set up your room. The key is to play lots of music in there, and just listen. So, Martin and I installed the speakers in my room, We spent the weekend and we did the install. I didn't pay people to come in. We spent hours and hours, fine-tuning and just listening to great productions. We've got a reference suite of tracks that we'll play and just, fine-tune our speakers until the references sound great. Then, we'll measure the room and see what's happening. And just, it just takes time. People often just throw their speakers up. Take time. Spend a couple of days really fine-tuning, the settings. A lot of speakers have a lot of settings. Your converters, your digital to analog converters have settings in there. So you have a lot of places that you can mess around with. Have a party. Get a couple of your friends over and just listen. Discuss it.
Hi, I found it very interesting. I'm up here. To your left. Never mind.
To my left, to my right.
I found it very interesting when you talked about education and when you left your school, there were like 3 schools in the UK and now there's 200. But this obviously goes back to the UK sort of making a business out of those schools. And at the end of the day, the market is being flooded with a lot of people who would like to become engineers, who would like to become producers. But like you said, when you went to this Tonmeister school, there's hardly any places for them to work. So what do you think is the responsibility of these businesses that are obviously interested in more and more students every year in terms of an industry that doesn't have any place for them?
I think some of the schools are really honest with the students and explain to them that the chances of them getting into the industry are pretty slim. If you think when I came into the industry 30 odd years ago, there was 3 schools. 100 of us started at the beginning, and about 10 of us left at the end. People dropped out. The thing is, it's a hard industry. Yeah, and when you speak to these schools, a lot of them do have quite a huge dropout rate. And somebody said to me, a lot of people will go to university and they study, but they don't actually go into the fields that they've studied. If they do history of art, they might not actually, go into working with art in any way. English literature, who knows? So they're saying to me, we need to view it like that. I think the schools just have to be brutally honest. It's tough. It took me 3 years back then, when there was a studio on every corner just about in London. It took me 3 years to get a paid job. I had to work for free for 3 years. I hear about it now. I don't think anyone should work for free. I think it's rude, but that is how it is in this industry to get in the door. But I think we've just got to keep talking about it. We have to, when I go into education, it's like, talk about it. What can these kids realistically expect when they come out of it? I went to study it because I didn't have the tools that are out there now. But I have, lots of people around me that didn't go into any of these schools and are brilliant, brilliant engineers and producers. So you don't really need a school. The thing is, they're not really going to teach you very much but theory and give you access to some tools. But you can learn it all. I mean, everything's out there already now. If I had what is available now back then, wow, how exciting. You've got access to everything. You don't need to spend money to go to a school. The only reason would be to access equipment.
We are out of time. So thank you so much for your questions, and thank you, Mandy.
Oh, thank you.